Recently, for some reason, the 19th book in the Railway series has been the subject of debate in the Toms community. It seems there is quite a divide between those who enjoy the book and those who do not, with very few occupying the middle ground. There does seem to be a common objection to the Culdee Fell Railway, about which the book is written, being viewed as a pointless addition to the island of Sodor in some fans' eyes. Personally, I'm a huge fan of Mountain Engines and the Culdee Fell Railway, so here is my list of 5 reasons why each is a credit to Wilbur Awdry's creation. Culdee and his railway are introduced to us with some brilliant Skarloey railway scenes. The first 2 stories in the book introduce the new type of railway, neatly bookended in between some familiar faces, and information about concepts such as rack and pinions and automatic brakes are imparted cleverly as foils for Sir Handel and Duncan's own problems. Not only is the audience eased into this unusual new railway with teeth in its tracks and funny looking engines expertly, they get there via some top level Skarloey railway arguments. Donald leaving in a huff as Sir Handel doesn't believe him is another highlight. Mountain Engines is a book of many firsts, and not just the first appearance of the Culdee Fell Railway. This was the first book to feature a significant flashback, all the way back to 1900 and the genesis of the Culdee Fell Railway. Before this, the most obvious example of a flashback was in Book 17, Gallant Old Engine, but that flashback was only 9 years. This extensive flashback gave us our earliest glimpse of Sodor to date, with passengers in time-specific clothes, which paved the way for 2 of Wilbur's more popular later books, Very Old Engines and Duke the Lost Engine. This book also has the first instance of Renius interacting with Sir Handel and Duncan, and also some of his first lines in the present day. It's also the first time the Skarloey Railway was illustrated by Edwards. Speaking of Edwards, his illustrations are fantastic. He really went above and beyond to get accurate depictions of the engines, the infrastructure and the landscape by travelling to Llanberis, the home of the Snowdon Mountain Railway upon which the Culdee Fell Railway is based. Peter Edwards visited in January, but the Snowdon Mountain Railway does not operate in winter. Many of the illustrations from the books are taken from postcards, but the influence of visiting this cold, secluded line is clear in his artwork. His tour of Llanberis sheds and workshop got probably the most atmospheric and imposing illustrations of the engines to date. The adverse weather and brooding atmosphere complements the tone of the stories well, especially the final one. The Railway series books were designed to be read aloud, and this book is brilliant for that. There is a large cast for the narrator to do voices for, with Skarloey, Renius, Sir Handel, Duncan, Godred, Culdee, Wilfrid, Patrick, Catherine and the owner all having speaking roles. The bickering between the Skarloey engines, as well as the reaction of the Mountain Engines to the new antagonist and Lord Harry, is all well written to be acted out. There are some really good technical words thrown in to stop the narrator getting bored, such as the superheated conceited joke, which is very much in the sagacious good gracious pattern of Oliver the Western Engine, and the auto brake being something the engine's sentience can control is a lovely touch. The stories are all well balanced with action and dialogue, and all have a thrill or a spill, but the best of the lot is the 4th story, Devil's Back, which is reminiscent of Gallant Old Engine, with the bravery of the engine and his crew at the fore. There is a remarkable redemption arc for Lord Harry. Although he only appears in 2 short stories, the audience really cares when he turns from a rude show-off to a worthy, brave engine, convincingly. This book sets the tone for the 7 final Wilbur Awdry books. Up until Duck and the Diesel Engine, the Railway series was a series of stories mostly about arguments and apologies, accidents and rescues. Duck and the Diesel Engine changed this by introducing the idea of dieselification, with steam engines being replaced, and so a darker tone was introduced. The following books alternated between the light-hearted Little Old Engine and Branchline engines, and the darker toned Twin Engines and Gallant Old Engine. Stepney the Bluebell Engine was the preceding book, and it had something of a mix between the light and dark tones, with a happy idea of preservation mixed with the threatening diesels and the illustration of the scrapped engines. From Mountain Engines onwards, the tone is more often serious. As well as Edward's style of illustrations and the difficulty steam engines were having on the mainland, Wilbur's writing style had matured. The later books he wrote often top fan polls of the best Railway series books, even though they may not be as well known or have the status as classics his earlier works have. Perhaps it was his impending retirement, as Mountain Engines and Very Old Engines were the last books written before Wilbur hung up the dog collar, or perhaps his test audience, that is his children, being in their late teens and early 20s by this point, set the more mature tone for these books. These 5 points are just a few things that I noticed when rereading Mountain Engines. Some people may not like the stories or the characters, which is fine, but I don't think it can be considered a bad book. Devil's Back is surely one of the best ending stories to date. Anyway, onto the Coldie Fell Railway as a whole. A criticism often levelled at the Coldie Fell Railway is that it only appeared in one book and was then forgotten about. However, this is not strictly true. After its debut in 1964 in Mountain Engines, the line appeared in the 12 Happy Engines book in 1970, the 1971 map, the Surprise Packet in 1972, and the Famous Engines book series throughout the 1970s. It also appeared in the 1979 and 1980 annuals. Before Christopher Awdry took over the series, the Coldie Fell Railway had comparable releases to the Small Railway and the Mid-Sodor Railway. Christopher Awdry has admitted that there haven't been more stories due to the stringent safety protocols, meaning there are few authentic incidents to base stories on. However, he did make a reference to the line in the final book of the series. Another criticism is that the line does not add much to the lore of the series, but this is also, to my mind, false. The line gives Sodor a further 10 named railway characters, as well as the owner, which, as of the publication of Mountain Engines, is a record which I do not believe has yet been broken. There is also quite a bit of history in this book, something fairly new to the series, but that will be present in many of Wilbert's remaining books, Very Old Engine and Duke the Lost Engine especially. We get the first mention of King Godred, which is a link to both Craven's Gate and the Skarloey Railway, as well as Coldie Fell being named after St Matcham, patron saint of Sodor. The line gives a rare glimpse of the Peel Godred branch, and also develops the areas around Coldie Fell and Lower Matcham, which first appeared on the 1958 map. Mountain Engines only introduces the names of the Summit Hotel, Coldie Fell Station, Devil's Back and its station, but the companion books later flesh out the surrounding areas. The name Coldie comes from the Irish language, and so is an interesting addition to the Sudric language. As well as the Skarloey Railway, the island's culture, history and spirit can be felt very strongly on the Coldie Fell Railway. In both the Coldie Fell Railway, as well as the Snowdon Mountain Railway, Wilbert's passion for these lines is clear. As a fan of railways great and small, weird and wonderful, his report on the Snowdon Mountain Railway is stirring. He wrote an article for the Church of England newspaper in 1963 about his journey up Snowdon with Reverend Teddy Boston. The little engine panted and snorted, clawing its way up the slope. It was a novel sensation to hear the engine's vociferous remarks coming at us from behind. From the window, as we looked back, we caught occasional glimpses of the fireman hard at work feeding the fire, and we wondered how many hundredweights of coal he needed for the hour's journey up 4 3/4 miles of mountainside. We watched the ribbon of track unrolling before us, sometimes seeming to go down, at others apparently rearing up before us like the side of a house, but we knew our eyes were playing tricks, for there was no downward or even level stretch up the whole ascent, and our engine was working hard the whole time. Upward, inexorably, she pushed our coach over viaduct, past waterfall and isolated farms until we reached the timberline at halfway, above which nothing seems to grow but grass and coarse scrub. Higher still to Clogwyn, where even the grass failed, and only on favourable days are trains allowed to cross the windswept ridge, from which we looked down 2,000 shadowy feet to the pass of Llanberis below. We left the ridge and struck the steepest climb of all, up which the engine barked and bellowed in her effort to lift us 1,000 feet in something less than a mile. The line rose above us, steeply disappearing into the skyline. Shouting her challenge to this obstacle, the little engine brought the skyline ever nearer till its grim edge faded into a magnificent landscape, and we trundled over the last and easier stretch to Summit Station, the highest in the British Isles. The Snowdon Mountain Railway left a clear and obvious impression on Wilbert Awdry, and he was encouraged to create a Sodor counterpart in the Coldie Fell. Over many years, the line was rounded out with care, and this is featured in the Island of Sodor book, as well as the maps, where the development of the area can be seen. If one wanted to, one could see evidence of many religious hints in this part of the island, from place names to the redemption of Lord Harry, or perhaps the struggle ever upwards to the heavens. But that's up to you. I'd suggest that variety is the spice of life. Sodor is a wonderful, ineffable place, with more mysteries and riddles than the fan base will ever be able to solve. The island, its people, history and railways are intriguing, and this obscure line adds to the intrigue. I think that the variety of railways, engines and locations introduced in the railway series is great, and would have loved to have seen more. How about if the 7¼ gauge miniature railway, as seen in the Christopher Audrey series, was introduced to the railway series? What if we got to meet the funicular railway at Skarloey? Or have a story featuring the Arsdale Tramroad and its horse-drawn stock? What if we got to meet the original coffee pots to Ran Thomas's branch line? Sodor may not be big enough for an underground system, or an elevated monorail, or even a tram network linking the towns together, all of which would have been fun to see. But these small lines would have enriched our knowledge and deepened our love of Sodor, just as its mountain railway has done. Lastly, the line has a strong character. Despite only appearing in one of the main series books, the line has a strong identity and leaves a lasting impression. There is no mistaking the funny-looking purple and orange engines puffing furiously in a stark, stunning landscape. You might not like them, but you won't forget them. If I were to make one final point, it would be that we'll never really know what would have happened if Wilbert hadn't stopped writing books in 1972. It's possible we would have got a follow-up to Mountain Engines. Diesels were spoken about on the Snowdon Mountain Railway in the 1970s, and they got their first 2 diesels in 1986, which could have had a story potential. Wilbert was not afraid to go international for his story ideas, and overseas there are far more rack and pinion lines than there are in the UK. Christopher Audrey seemed to dismiss the possibility of future stories on the Caldy Fell in 2005, even though the ill-fated diesel railcars had already arrived on the Snowdon Mountain Railway in 1995. There is definitely story potential left in this line. Thank you for watching my first opinion-based video. I hope you enjoyed it. If there's anything else you think I should explore, please let me know in the comments. I hope to see you again soon.